So we're gonna talk some Sinners, and let's talk about I think the two biggest scenes. Obviously, when all the musicians come, and the fire and the juke joint. What was the process of trying to pull that off?
It was just a collaboration between every department. It took so much planning, weeks and weeks of planning. It's Autumn, our cinematographer, Ryan, all the actors, the music, the practical special effects of actually literally burning a roof down, as well as helping that and with visual effects, helping get the camera through the roof, which the camera couldn't do. It's just speaks to the entire film, like collaboration between departments was at the heart of everything we did.
Similarly, though, the vampire at the end burning was also a critical moment of the film. What were the challenges in that one?
It was, well, the fire tornado was something that really needed to be as genuine as possible because the whole film is, the effects aren't supposed to take you out of the movie. And so for the death at the end where we had the fire tornado, we had to practically make that. It took us quite a few weeks to come up with the look and to get it perfected. And then these guys took it home. It's great.
Also a real collaboration with the special effects makeup department, very complex, staged, real prosthetics in front of the camera for the different stages of Remek's death. And Espen and his team created digital versions of these stages and expanded the whole environment behind them with complex water simulations to complete something seamless that really makes the moment impactful.
Now, for you, did you have any favorite scene you like? Maybe a smaller scene, scenes that maybe wouldn't be as noticed by, like, say, student filmmakers as visual effects? Did you have a special scene you really liked?
Yeah, I don't know about not noticed, because I think probably everybody realized there was visual effects involved, but the snake attack at the beginning of the movie on the truck bed was an interesting one just because Ryan put a lot of thought into that in terms of making sure that it was really kind of a foreshadowing of what happened later at the juke joint with the standoff with cornbread. And I think there were some really subtle things like the eye effect on the snake kind of mimicking the look of the vampire's eyes, and there was a lot of thought that went into all of those different processes so that there's a real line through the whole movie that you can appreciate on second, third viewing even more.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. There's a couple of worlds I'd like to talk about. The first thing, you have to create 1930s. Separating from the vampire, what was the biggest challenge trying to create the look of the 30s with visual effects?
Well, like so many of all of the visual effects in Sinners, in fact, they're rooted in photography and they're rooted in the design of our collaborators on the film, and in particular in that instance, Hannah Beechler, phenomenal production designer, and really we were honoring her designs, and if ever we needed to create anything, we would go to her and say, this is what we're thinking, how do you feel about it? And she would be very constructive and giving us lots and lots of notes for us to hit. So really we were helping support the other departments and would always defer to them really on the design in particular.
That was a key aspect of our visual effects work. I call it preservation of creative intent. Like everyone was cast by Ryan in front of the camera as well as behind the camera. And he wants everyone to bring their ideas and their creativity. So the moment that we're building things or rebuilding things that go into other departments' area or territory, we always rope them back in because we want to preserve their creative intent. And I think that's really important, especially when it comes to creating seamless visual effects work, because you want it to be technically seamless. And for us, that meant we had to create all the beautiful imperfections of 65mm IMAX film. But it also needs to be a seamlessness in front of the camera. And you can only achieve that if what you're building digitally is actually in line with what everyone else was doing on set. Hannah, production design, Ruth, wardrobe, and then especially Autumn Gerald Akapo, our DP. Anything that we did, we ran by her to make sure it is in line with her framing, her lighting, and just overall her creative intent.
Now, the first kind of fantasy scene was a juke joint where the different era musicians come in and they had the fires. I argue that scene doesn't work, the movie fails. That to me, that is really, because you're setting up so much. What were the challenges of doing that scene?
Well, I totally agree. From the first instance of reading that scene on the script, what popped into my head wasn't what we saw in the cinema at the end. It was hard to picture, its ancestors and ghostly figures and things like that. But we started that whole process with a piece of music from Ludwig Göransson. We then worked with our visualization team and partners at Barraboom here in LA and in Spain, and we started to block everything out to understand where the ancestors would appear, to understand how the camera would move, to understand the spatial constraints of the set, to understand how the Steadicam could move around. And the Steadicam had to be modified to be lighter, to be able to be moved around the space with smaller magazines, which meant that they couldn't run for as long a take as they usually could. So we had to understand that and find cut points within the scene. So it was very collaborative.
How about for you? What was the challenge for that sequence for you?
For what we call the surreal montage, I mean, we like to front load, which meant, as James just mentioned, an enormous amount of planning. There was a time when we were delivering a visualization iteration per day. And every day another one and another one and another one, because this was really about crafting what it needed to be, so that on the day when we were shooting all the little sections, because it's actually a 5-section oneer that we had to stitch together, we wanted it to be like a painting by numbers exercise. At that point, we wanted to make sure that Ryan can focus solely on performance. We didn't want him to worry about where does the camera have to be and when, and does it work with music and all of that. At that point, we had to know what we're doing. So I think overall, we delivered more than 50 previous iterations over the course of 6 weeks. And I remember the day when we brought one of those previous iterations together with the music by the Goransons. That was an incredible moment, like seeing it, how it was becoming alive in that particular moment was incredible. It was a total goosebumps moment.
You had to pull off the climax, the vampire burning scene, really the end of the film. What was the challenge with the burning up our vampires?
There's a lot of components at play in that movie. It's the death of our big bad, Remick, and there are contributing factors to his death. He gets smashed over the head with a guitar, he gets staked through the back, and the rising sun contributes to his flesh blistering and burning. So it was a collaboration between visual effects, practical effects, special effects, makeup, and so it really started with a chart to say, you guys are taking care of this, and then visual effects find the places where we can provide the sinew, so to speak, to build everything together. But it was really being true to the stuff we were able to film, and then visual effects doing the things that we couldn't do with makeup.
It was really rewarding. A lot of that hinges on prosthetic makeup. And those pieces were incredibly complex. And a lot of them we actually never shot in front of the movie camera. They were built so that we can scan them, because the intent was Ryan didn't want to cut away from the progressive demise of Remick. He wanted to show it in the frame. So we needed to make that happen digitally. And but at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, we didn't want to stray away from this preservation of creative intent principle. So essentially what we did is we applied digital makeup and then blended between the different stages. And the biggest compliment that we received eventually was that Mike Fontaine, the guy who put all of that together, called me and was like, I can't tell anymore what you did and what I did. The only reason why I know it wasn't me is because it's blistering and boiling and it's steaming and smoking, and so that was incredible. That was really great. And again, this goes hand in hand with those themes that we said. One other really big thing that I should mention is we were trying to create timeless work, because that's a big thing to Ryan. He talked to us about that a lot. A lot of the films from the early 2000s, in his eyes, you can still watch today. The visual effects work doesn't pull you out because it ages really well and it's timeless. That's what the goal was for what we were doing on Sinners. He wanted a film that he can still watch in 25 years and it will still look good. That's why we were falling back on a lot of those old school techniques, because they work. And it's amazing what you can achieve if you do this, this delineated handshake where the lines are all getting blurred between, who was doing what.